Act Out is headed to the DNC next week, and as always, we could use your help to get there. In order to become a patron of independent, non-corporatized, unpropagandized news, visit patreon.com/actout. This week, we continue with part 2 of our interview with former Philadelphia Police Captain Ray Lewis and dig into some of the Philly PD's sordid past so as to prepare activists for what they might encounter as we take to the streets for justice and equality. But first, taste the Empire's palate. A dark red drink lingers on the nose, the smell that delves, digs in and dwells, fear and money. The taste of war is laced with a crisp cocaine. The Empire's palate is bitter and strong. A high never hollowed, a creed blindly followed. What is rock bottom if you just keep digging? It's just so addicting. Sure, we could stop, but what for? When more of this bad thing feels better. A slippery slope getting much wetter. Slide, feel the ride, the thick viscous slime as it glides. Puff up your pride, the jingoist kind. Swallow. Swallow. Drink it in, humanity's sin. The Empire's palate is aged to prefection, a cold hard rejection of freedom for those who can't pay their way. Let's just say, an old bitter pill, a gleaming gold city on slave trading hills, a still life arranged, a stillborn in chains, justice forlorn, liberty's wake where the masses will mourn, a thirst never slaked. The Empire's palate is sweet. Touch of bitter. Like death, what a treat. 4 and then some more. The courses are served with a whitewash pate, a shut up and pray, a keep calm and stay where you are. The hunger won't let you get far. Crawl up to the bar, always open, always hoping you'll be thirsty and jonesing for relief. And what a relief. Shrug off all the grief of digging for answers. This search like a cancer, just stop and open up. This all-round fixer, a potent elixir, will free you from thinking. Come, let's start drinking. The fear just like honey and war that makes money. Baby, drink up. The Empire's palate is smooth. The Kool-Aid will bring us to heel. The rapture will deaden the feels and quiet the minds that do wheel. The Empire's palate will color your thoughts with thick, simple lines, left, right in line. If you're coloring, stay in the lines and toe the line, hold the line. 1, 2, 3, drink, and again, for you think, just drink. From this bottomless pit, 1, 2, 3, drink, greed, hate, and fear bottoms up. From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out. Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. So, as many of you know, the DNC will take place in Philadelphia, July 25th through July 28th. And even under normal circumstances, tensions would run high as activists call out the corporatists in their ivory towers. But this year, with clear-cut election fraud trailing behind the Democratic darling Hillary Clinton as she makes her way to the winner's circle, a downtrodden Bernie healing by her side, tensions are even higher. Activists on the left are planning a slew of actions to not only call out corruption, but to call out the party as a whole, and indeed the inherent bullshittedness of the two-party system. As I mentioned in the episode from 2 weeks ago, the Democrats have been leaning more and more right with each passing election cycle, and you only have to look at the rising number of independent voters or pledged Greens to see that a whole lot of people aren't buying the money-soaked lip service lines. As Michelle Alexander succinctly put it in an op-ed earlier this year, quote, "It would be easier to build a new party than to save the Democratic Party from itself." And I'm inclined to agree. And I'll add on to that by saying that you don't even need to start from scratch. As I mentioned, the Green Party is growing in popularity, as is the Socialist Alternative Party, that has now announced their push to support Jill Stein's campaign for president. Indeed, one of the events slated for the week of the DNC is the Socialist Convergence, where, among others, both Jill Stein and Kshama Sawant will speak about next steps for the populist movement, beyond Bernie, as it were. Other events include Occupy the DNC, the Black DNC Resistance March against the capitalist and racist government, the People's Caravan, the March for Our Lives calling for money for the poor, not for war, March for Clean Energy with an anti-TPP contingent, and more. And overseeing all of this will be Philadelphia's finest. Perhaps the finest of which, wouldn't be hard to suggest that, we sat down and spoke to. For those of you who didn't catch last week's show, be sure to cue it up because today we're airing part 2 of our interview with former police captain Ray Lewis. Last week, he spoke to us about how he went from a once brutal cop to an occupying, sign-bearing, anonymous, mask-wearing activist calling for love, kindness, and justice. He also laid out specific points as to how police departments across the country can address the issue of police brutality, from before the first day of training to 20 and 30 years into a cop's career. And this week, as we move closer to the Democratic Convention in Philly, we'll talk to Ray about tactics on both sides of the front lines and what activists should prepare for in the streets of Philly. But first, let's take a look at some of Philly's backstory on this type of event. In 2000, the RNC was held in Philly, and as Chris Hermes chronicles in his book, Crashing the Party, at least 11 Pennsylvania state police troopers were tasked with infiltrating activist groups based on claims that these activists were planning violent attacks and storing explosives in a warehouse that in fact housed puppets, signs, and art. The city used these bogus claims to then obtain a warrant to search the warehouse, arrest 70 people, and destroy what they found because fuck puppets. And while a case back in the 80s dictated that Philadelphia City Police must obtain permission from the police commissioner, deputy commissioner, and the city's managing director in order to infiltrate nonviolent political groups, the Pennsylvania State Police troopers have no such constraints, which they proved yet again in 2009 when they spied on activists ahead of the G20 summit in Pittsburgh, and in 2010 when state police found themselves in the midst of this soon-to-be scandalous surveillance web cast by the Pennsylvania Office of Homeland Security, who, quote, hired the Philadelphia-based Institute of Terrorism Research and Response, ITRR, that same year to unlawfully spy on a diverse range of political groups, including those opposed to natural gas drilling, as well as anti-war and LGBTQ activists, posing no threat to the public. The ITRR then turned around and shared this information with state police, who made some friendly house calls to activists and their families, in the hopes that they'd get scared, shut the fuck up, and go away. So, now that the DNC is looming, the question posed by Chris Hermes, and indeed much of the activist community, is, what will the law enforcement response in Philly look like? Well, for more on this, let's go straight into part 2 of our interview with former police captain Ray Lewis. You've seen both sides, obviously. You've seen how activists use their tactics, and you've seen how police have used their tactics against activists. Let's start with police officers. What tactics have you seen them use, and what do you think is the appropriate type of tactics to use at, say, a civil disobedience action?
Well, the one tactic, well, two tactics. The number one is kettling, where they actually lead you into an area where you're entrapped, and you don't even have an avenue out if you want, and they're peacefully walking, and yet they're trapped. This is going to discourage a lot of people next time, because people say, no, even if I'm quiet, even if I'm not throwing rocks, I can still get kettled. But the very first one I noticed was in Zuccotti Park at rallies, something that I could not figure out the first couple of times I saw it. And then it hit me. It was ingenious, evilly ingenious. But I would see cops walking through the crowd, and they would just grab somebody who was doing nothing. They weren't shouting. They weren't throwing anything. They did not even have a sign. And they would arrest that person and take them out. I said, okay, that person must have done something that I didn't see. And then I'm surveying that. Now I'm keeping more of my eye on the crowd also. I see another cop go in, a couple cops, and they arrest them. And they were very respectable, dressed. They were clean, they were your average, they were like your school teacher, your nurse, whatever. And I realized then what the tactic was. It was to show everybody you're not safe. Even if you're not shouting, even if you're not throwing anything, even if you don't have a sign, you can be arrested. So that message came across real, because everybody was like, what'd they do? What'd they do? What'd they do? And so, and people have a real, good people have a stigma about being arrested.
Yeah.
Good people think, no, that's so wrong to get arrested, because they're raised that way. And society breeds that into you, that it is wrong to get arrested. And so people are, number one, they're terrified of being arrested because they fear what might happen to them. But number two, it's so degrading to people. So you're good people at these rallies. I can't go anymore. And so New York, NYPD was very successful in getting rid of your middle-class America from these demonstrations.
So how do you feel about that paradigm that getting arrested is a terrible thing? Do you believe that paradigm is still necessary at this particular point in time when we're really getting further and further into this corruption and this corporatocracy? Do you think that paradigm of being afraid of being arrested needs to change?
It has to change. You're not going to see any change in this society unless people realize they're going to have to be arrested. And instead of calling it civil disobedience, I don't see the controllers of us for years, the ruling class. They have used all different type of names, the names they want to place on things. Disobedience, that has bad connotations, disobedience. How about dissent, civil dissent? We're dissenting against the policies of the ruling class. So people have to realize that when you dissent, that's a positive thing. When you dissent against evil, what's more positive than that? And it's interesting, my arrest. I was asked to come down to Occupy Wall Street demonstration on November 17th. I'll never forget the date because it was my birthday. And I said, sure, I'm down here to support you guys. You want me down there? They said, yeah. It was early. It was 7 a.m. I said, it doesn't have to be that early. But they wanted to close Wall Street. And so everybody starts coming in Wall Street like 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. So they wanted to get there early. And it was an incredible amount of people there, raucous, yelling, but not violent. But they wanted to get their point across to Occupy Wall Street, to Wall Streeters. And so I said, sure, I'll go down there. And I took my sign, and I always have to have a sign. That's extremely important to me. Or people, well, what are you doing here? Yeah. You know. So I think that day my sign said, NYPD, don't be Wall Street mercenaries. I was not going to get arrested here this day, but then I saw two things happening. I saw all these young kids. And when I say kids, I don't mean that derogatorily, but when you're under 50, you're a kid to me, all right? And they were in their like 20s, and they were being drugged, one after another, because they were committing civil dissent. They were sitting in the street, stopping traffic. So I don't have a problem with the police arresting them, and they chose to be dragged out, more emphatic visual. But then when I saw all of them, one after another, two things hit my mind. Number one, they put themselves on the line for their physical welfare. Number two, they put themselves on the line for confinement. They had no idea how long. And that just so overwhelmed me. It just overwhelmed me emotionally that they were willing to do that. I said, I just can't stand here. I gave my sign to a Spanish newswoman, and I went out and I sat down with the others. Now, the police initially went around. They got everybody next to me, but they went around me. I got up. I went back to where they were sitting again. They arrested everybody else but me and went around me. To this day, Eleanor, I'm not sure if they were showing me respect, camaraderie, or whether they just did not want to make me a martyr. I don't know. But anyway, the third time, and this is on tape of my arrest, the third time they grabbed me, and they said, it was something like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And I shouted, I want to be arrested. And then they arrested me. Now, the thing is, being a cop, I still have cop blood in me, and I did not make them drag me. I stood up. And I walked diagonally across the intersection. Walking across that intersection handcuffed was the proudest moment of my life.
So in terms of As you know, you said that you still have that cop blood in you, so you still have that. I mean, I imagine you can't get rid of it. So, as such, when you've gone to these protests and these actions, is there anything that you see with the activists that you would suggest they do otherwise? Are there any certain tactics that you think, oh, that's really, really good. That's a really good tactic coming from somebody with so much experience as a cop?
Yeah, the best tactic to me, and there's pros and cons with every tactic. But if I was to go with one tactic, it would be nonviolent dissent. You're trying to get a message across. To me, I'm always thinking I want to get this message across to white America. It's like white America controls who gets elected in this country. White America can decide whether Jill Stein is the president or Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. And so we want to get the message across. White America, violence will be portrayed by your Fox News, your CNNs, and all the others as the demonstration. Violence, violence, violence. And white America is not going to go for that. But if there's peace and even maybe standing up and being arrested, white America will be more willing to see, why are these people willing to go to jail? For what? Why are they so dedicated? So that's my feel on any type of demonstration, is that it should be nonviolent. I also believe you have to have signs. You have to have signs so that when people are, and readable signs, too often any sign is good, don't get me wrong, but sometimes just a little piece of cardboard and you pencil and you can't really read. Try to make it bigger if you can and more legible. Communication, it's all about communication. Signs get the message across. I would not advocate violence at all, but then you have to understand too, law enforcement is very clever. They're going to have guys, their own people in there throwing rocks. They're going to have their own people urinating on a police car. And this is where the Fox News is going to zero right in on a quote hippie who's an undercover cop urinating on the police car right away. See the damage that does? So we're up against a formidable foe.
It seems that, in the past, there's that meme that police officers used to look like this, and now they look like this, and it's a picture of a cop in an M-wrap or something. With that shift from, like the friendly police officer to this brutal police, these brutal police forces that have, militant weaponry, talk a little bit about that rise and how that is like the camaraderie becomes more of this, we're fighting a war, we're not police officers.
I'll tell you exactly where the militarization of the police came from. You never had this near this extent, prior to the Occupy movement. The Occupy movement shook up Wall Street. It shook up the 1%, who I also refer to as the filthy rich. When you have billions and billions of dollars, that's sociopathic. The hoarding is a disease. Hoarding money is a disease. But the consequences are so bad when you have to oppress people and exploit people to get that money. If you're paying your good people good money and good health care and good education, all right, make your billion. But not when you have to oppress people to make that money. But anyway, this 1% saw this happening. They saw it happening all over the country. They saw themselves threatened. Now, who would protect them? The police. They also knew, though, that the police, in and of themselves, with their single Smith & Wessons or Glocks, weren't going to be able to overtake all these uprisings alone. And subsequently, they realized we have to have military equipment. Number one, just for the intimidation factor. Very intimidating. Number two, we will be easily put down any uprising. Now, the thing here is they always had the military at their hands to use, but the ruling class, smart enough to realize, no, we can't bring in the military. That would look like a dictatorship. People love their local police department. People will feel very comfortable if their local police department becomes slowly militarized. And so they say, that's what we'll do. We won't count on the military. That'll look really bad. But their local police departments, that's their own police. So, and I noticed this with out in Ferguson, there were the rioting that took place, the burning, the uprising, was shown back in my hotel room. I watched CNN, and it was shown over and over again, the same clips. And they showed Michael Brown Jr.'s stepfather up on a car, the trunk of a car, shouting, "Burn this place down, burn this place down." And I timed it. Every 15 minutes, white America was seeing the rioting, the black animals running through the streets, burning, looting. Also during that time, there were black citizens of Ferguson. They had blue sweatshirts with white lettering. Peacekeeper. They were to take places in front of stores to say, listen, this is not the way to do it. And they were members of the community. So they were going to put themselves on the line to try to stop the burning and the looting. Do you know in those, and there were a lot of them, a lot of these blue t-shirts with white lettering. Not once did any news broadcast interview a peacekeeper. And that's tactical. Everything here is so thought out by the media. The filthy rich own the media. Everything is thought out. Nothing happens by chance. They wanted all of white America to see blacks as animals, wild savages that cannot be trusted, that we have to keep down. So what do all white people see out there? Wow, okay, they're burning and they're looting the black neighborhoods, okay, but damn, they could come into my neighborhood next time. So what do they want? They want their police departments to be strong enough to stop the rampaging of black animals coming into their neighborhood. How do they do that? They don't now allow their local police department to become militarized. They request. Now, the 1% has them totally manipulated. They're doing the job of the 1%. 1% doesn't have to push the militarization of police departments on the white America. White America is now going to their local police meetings saying, listen, we saw what happened in Ferguson. We want you guys better armed. We want you guys with machine guns. We want you guys with a couple tanks if needed. So the media got white America to do their job for them, to get police departments militarized.
So, picking up on what you just said, do you think it's possible for these movements, whether that be Occupy or Black Lives Matter or any of these movements, to be successful with the police so militarized and with this juxtaposition of ideas that the police are here to protect the 1% and we are trying to pull down the power of the 1%? Do you think it's possible for movements like Occupy to get those demands with that paradigm in place?
What's difficult here is that white America, they see that they're losing some sick time. Well, I'll tell you, a good friend of mine, this is what he said. I lost sick time. They took away a couple holidays. My money, my pension is going to be reduced. I have to pay more into my health care. I don't have the education funds that they were willing to, give me. But I still have a job. Filthy rich love hearing that. So when you can say you're losing all that, but still be thankful that I have a job, you're brainwashed to think, hey, I can't lose this because this is the last thing I have. So even though they're cutting everything, my lifestyle is not what it used to be, at least I'm surviving. And the only way I see any type of movement being successful is when you have to have massive amounts of people really detrimentally affected, losing their jobs.
Because human beings are just too adaptable. We have this ability to adapt to situations and say like, oh, well, whatever, I work weekends now and I don't have 2 weeks of vacation. The rest of the world has like 6 weeks of vacation, but I'm proud to have a job at McDonald's at $9 an hour. That's sort of... At least I have a job. That's the thinking. So finally, I wanted to ask, because this is sort of a hot topic right now, Philadelphia, the DNC. They're already saying that they're going to build a fence around the convention center, and there are protests planned on several of the days of the convention. What do you think, I know that it's been a while since you worked in Philadelphia, but what do you think activists should be ready to see when they go out into the streets?
What my advice to activists who are going to the DNC is to prepare for anything. You better be prepared to have that black stick whacked against you. Don't think, if you're in a crowd and they're trying to break that crowd up, whether you're violent or not, those sticks are going to be swelling. So you can be peaceful. Maybe certain demonstrations will be handled with peaceful arrests. But you have to be prepared for tear gas, for violence, for being beaten. You have to realize that's a possible consequence, very possible, at an event like this, because you're going to have a lot of people, including professional instigators, who are going to try to cause problems. And there are going to be rocks thrown, there is going to be violence. And whether you can separate yourself from that quick enough, I don't know. I wouldn't count on it.
So with that idea of the professional instigators that you mentioned, is it possible then to have like a purely nonviolent protest? I mean, if you believe in the tenets of nonviolence and then somebody that you don't recognize in your group just starts throwing rocks and then the police respond with tear gas or, these non-lethal weapons, is it possible at this point to have a nonviolent protest?
Well, not only do you have the local police putting people in there, you have Department of Homeland Security, you have the FBI, and you have corporations. You have a corporation, they bring in a guy, listen, a couple months, grow a beard, you're going to be our guy that goes out to these protests. We're not going to ask you to throw a rock at the police or anything, but here's an American flag, here's a match.
As activists, how do we respond to that?
Well, you like to give freedom to protesters of burning the American flag. And there's really not much you can do because it's spontaneous. There's not a discussion. Should I burn this flag, guys? What you have to have, and I always go back to this, you have to have so many people that it overwhelms these incidents.
For activists headed to the DNC, the ACLU of Pennsylvania has a DNC landing page where you can access information on permits, links to a list of your rights as a protester, a quick breakdown of where most of the actions and rallies are taking place, and more. Visit the link below for more information, and we'll, of course, include that in the show's description. And that, revolutionaries, will do it for this week's Dose of Dissent. Next week, I will be in Philly, and we'll be bringing you a special DNC episode on August 3rd, but in the meantime, stay tuned for on-the-ground updates via Twitter and Facebook during the whole week of the convention. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please spread and share this with all of your friends, foes, and people you don't know. Check out the last slide to see all the sites that I mentioned in this week's show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. For now, from the Devil's Den, good night and act out. And real quick, to keep independent, non-corporatized media like this show going, donate at Occupy.com/donate. If you'd like to donate directly to Act Out, visit Patreon.com/actout.